The WAFB Podcast Network is sponsored by Neighbors Federal Credit Union.
I am very concerned about LSU football heading into Week 4 against UCLA. Welcome back to Game Time, everybody. I'm John Eads. Pleased to be with you. Be sure to like and subscribe. I got some grievances to air about the Tigers here as we reach the, quarter mark, I guess, of the season. 3 games in the regular season with 9 to go after this. And from what I've seen, I don't know if LSU is a playoff contender this year. I don't know if they're an SEC title contender this year based on what I've seen 3 games in. Now, there's been a good mix. You had the first game against USC against, in a borderline elite, I would say, tier team. Obviously, they're ranked in the top 15. Solid program. They've continued since that season opener to win games. They're going to Michigan this week. You've played not a bad team, but a lower level team in Nichols from the FCS, and you've played a middle of the pack kind of team in South Carolina Open SEC play. And from week 1 to week 3, I did not see the kind of improvements I needed to see to have more confidence in this team being a playoff squad. Now, coming into the season, I pegged the Tigers as a 10-win program, borderline playoff team, probably looking at a 10, 11, or 12 seed. And right now, I'm not feeling too confident in that prediction. And watching the South Carolina game and what happened there gives me all the reassurance in the fact that I don't feel good about that prediction. Now, let's start with this. Couple reasons why I don't feel as good about LSU football right now. And I will give you those. A lot of you are probably feeling the same way. I think I'm speaking for a majority of the fan base here. So LSU was a 7-point favorite going into this game at South Carolina. So really on a neutral field, the Tigers are like a 10 or 11-point favorite. If they were to play in a bowl game, in the Metrodome, whatever, the Superdome, doesn't matter. Not, in Columbia with College game day there and the rowdy fans and the home field advantage that South Carolina had. So this game, on paper, should have been a lot easier than it was for LSU to win. And this game reminded me a little bit of the Mississippi State game last year, LSU's SEC opener in Starkville there, which they won handedly. It also reminded me of the win at Missouri last season when it was, high scoring. Major Burns' pick 6 late kind of sealed it. Now, that was a much better Missouri team than this South Carolina team is, but I don't want you to fall into the same trap that I did in thinking that because of that win, LSU was back and they were all of a sudden going to beat a team like Alabama, run the table, and find their way into the SEC championship game. I don't think that's going to happen. So, as I said, the Tigers were a pretty heavy favorite coming into this game, despite all of South Carolina's dominance against Kentucky, College game day, all the hype. And there are things that I saw that were apparent in week 1 that clearly didn't get fixed. And if they're not fixed now, I'm not sure when they're going to be fixed, if they're going to be fixed, because of the personnel you have, the lack of coaching, whatever it might be. So, first of all, I wouldn't say LSU won this game at all. I would say the Tigers avoided losing the game because there were so many times where South Carolina was just like, please win this game. We don't want to win this game. You guys can have it. We really don't want it. And they just did not take it. They refused to take it. They allowed South Carolina to hang around despite not having their starting quarterback the entire second half. Let me tell you this. If Lenore Sellers doesn't get injured and not play basically the entire second half, LSU does not win that game. Because with Robbie Ashford in at quarterback, he is nowhere near the type of athlete that Lenore Sellers is. He is nowhere near the kind of quarterback that he is either. South Carolina got, 10 points in the second half? 3 of those came off of a fumble deep in LSU territory when Nussmeier had the snap bounce off his chest and onto the ground. And then on one, Raheem Sanders' 66-yard touchdown. More on that in a second. Other than that, South Carolina did not move the ball in the second half after really stomping all over the Tigers in the first half at full strength with Sellers in at quarterback. And I know we could sit here and we could play the woulda, shoulda, coulda game, and you could play it on both sides, right? If this penalty's not called, this happens. If this is not, then that. But I'm just telling y'all, if Sellers played that second half, LSU's not winning this game. But he didn't play, and the Tigers did find a way to win. Now, I've still got concerns with that because in the first half, they had no answers for Sellers in his legs. He's not the kind of passer that Jalen Milroe is, that Jackson Dart is. other quarterbacks you'll see this season, even Jackson Arnold, and he still found ways to impact the game in big, big ways. And that was another thing that was concerning to me, the big plays. They had, South Carolina, 5 different explosives, gains of 20 yards or more. Some of them came on the ground, some of them came through the air. LSU didn't have an answer for the dual threat abilities that Sellers had, which means they're in big, big trouble when Jalen Milroe and Alabama come into town and play the Tigers in a couple weeks here. Because if you couldn't stop Sellers, a guy that struggles to throw the ball, I don't know what you're going to do against a guy like Jalen Milroe that just lit up Wisconsin's defense, one of the more respected defenses in the Big Ten, with both his arm and his legs. What did Brian Kelly say coming into the season? We got to limit the big plays defensively. That's what plagued this defense really all season last year. It was the 3-play, the 4-play, even the 1-play drives where it was a deep bomb touchdown. It was a long run where the running back went untouched and scored a touchdown. And it was better against USC. I didn't see a lot of explosives in that game. Obviously, Nichols, there were a couple, but, whatever. In this game, though, 5 different explosive plays, as I mentioned. And 2 of them were in situations where, it was like 2 or 3 in even 1-play drives, which just can't happen. That doesn't play to the strength of how you want to win football games this year. Ball possession, controlling the game, that kind of thing. So Lenore Sellers had a 1-play, 75-yard touchdown run. That was after LSU had gained momentum off of a forced turnover. And then later in the game in the second half, Sanders, the running back, had a 66-yard run in a situation where Ashford was playing quarterback and you knew they were going to run the football. So Brian Kelly thinks that those things are correctable. It's assignment type stuff. It's a little thing here and there that's got to be adjusted. I'm not so sure, though. I mean, what I see is a quarterback one-on-one with a safety 20 yards downfield, which is a very hard tackle to make. I don't know if that's correctable. Same thing with that 66-yard run by Sanders around the left side. That kind of stuff just can't happen. And again, this was a game where you knew South Carolina had to move the ball running it, and you still couldn't stop it. What are you going to do against Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart, who are legitimate threats in the passing game? I don't know. So those are my problems with the defensive side. It's the big plays. It's the simple, quote-unquote, things that they're not fixing, and I'm not sure how they're going to fix them. Now, these aren't going to be problems against UCLA because I have to look more at the Bruins, but they are garbage. They lost to Indiana by 30 points at home. Just to paint a picture for you. I don't need to say anything more about that, I don't think. But later in the season, you will get burned for these things again, just like last year. Now, the offense has been good. I think LSU, not from a running standpoint, from a passing standpoint, efficiency standpoint, probably one of the better units in the country. Garrett Nussmeier's off to a great start. But there's a couple things that need to be better. First of all, slow starts on offense. The Tigers came out and went, they got stuffed on 4th and goal against USC. In this game against the other USC, they began the game with 3 straight 3-and-outs. Punt, punt, punt. And one of those punts got blocked, and that turned into a South Carolina touchdown. You can't afford, especially on the road, to see yourself get down 17-0 because your defense is struggling and you can't even get a first down on offense. It can't happen. Now, did Joe Sloan and the offense eventually figure it out? Yes, which is good. But there's going to be games this year. I'm thinking of, obviously Alabama and Ole Miss, but like Texas A&M on the road, Arkansas on the road, where if you go 3-and-out on your first 3 possessions, you're in a really tough spot. And those teams, maybe not Arkansas, but A&M for sure, are not going to allow you to get back in the game because of dumb mistakes that they make. So you've got to hit the ground running. You've got to find a way to score on your first possession of the game and set the tempo, especially in these big games still to come. And then the last point I had on the offense is probably the most prevalent, and it was since week 1, red zone offensive efficiency. In this game, you scored 4 touchdowns on 7 red zone trips. Is that bad? Not necessarily, but in 2 of those trips specifically, you came up empty. You didn't get any points, not even a field goal. 4th and goal when Nussmeier threw it to the sideline, Williams was out of bounds, and then when he threw an interception inside the 15-yard line trying to force the ball into triple coverage. That can't happen. You at least got to get 3 points out of that. But on top of that, I want to see more touchdowns in the red zone. Because Brian Kelly said this on Monday. If we would have done this, if we would have done that, if we would have scored touchdowns every time we were in the red zone, this game would have been out of hand. Well, yes, of course, and that would be great. But you've said that before, and we saw that week 1 against USC. If the Tigers score even one more red zone touchdown in that game, I think they win that football game. So I'm starting to hear this a lot now. If we did this, if we did that, you just got to do it. And I don't know if they can do it. You know, they get into these ruts, frankly, from a play calling standpoint, where they just don't have the magic answer to get the ball into the end zone. Now, that could change. Just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean they can't do it, but it's going to have to change. And 4 of 7 in the red zone with 2 empty trips cannot happen. I don't care who you're playing. So from an offensive standpoint, can't be starting out slow. We can't have 3 and outs to begin the game. I'd like to see them go down and score in the first drive, really, and set the tempo of the game, like I said. And I want to see improvements in the red zone. Better play calling, better schemes, using your athletes in a more efficient way, getting the tight ends more involved for sure. That's a point I wanted to make 2 weeks ago, and I forgot to. I'm making it now. So, look, I've got concerns with this team. If that's the same LSU squad that we saw last week, not against UCLA, not against South Alabama, they're going to win those games. They'll win them handedly. They could do that playing as bad as they did against South Carolina. But there are a lot of big ones left in the schedule, man. I've mentioned them already. Alabama, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Arkansas on the road. Like, these are games that are not gimmies. And if they play anywhere remotely close to how they did at South Carolina with the mistakes, allowing the big plays, offensive inefficiency, this team might struggle to win 8 games. So I'm concerned right now. These things can change in the future. But I am not feeling good about this team winning 10 games and sneaking into the playoff at this point. Let me know what you think, if you agree, disagree with anything that I said. And, the Tigers have UCLA coming in here this weekend. They're a 24-point favorite. This should not at all be a close game. I will give you a preview and a prediction later in the week here coming up on Saturday. But if this is closer than 14 points, you should be pounding the panic button. Right now, I'm just slightly tapping it. But you would pound that panic button if LSU does not win this game by at least 17 points against UCLA on Saturday. Again, like and subscribe. Hit me up in the comment section. And we'll be back in just a little bit with your preview and prediction for UCLA this coming weekend.